On the day of my fiancé and I's wedding, my sister Sujanian leapt from the rooftop. The mobile phone she was holding at the time of her death showed call records in my name. Mom and Dad held her remains and questioned me as they cried. If you hadn't come back so suddenly, Jianyan wouldn't have been able to jump. Are you happy that Jianyan is dead now? In order to get justice for my sister, they sent me to a memory extraction facility. Even though they knew that extracting my memory might kill me, they insisted. Until they saw the truth and cried and begged me to forgive them. On the day of the wedding, I held the ring in my hand and was about to put it on the man in front of me. The pain of my illness made my body unable to stop trembling. I desperately wanted to restrain myself, want to give myself a perfect wedding. But I was still pale and sweating coldly from the pain. My abdomen hurt as if it was twisted by a knife. Even the hand holding the ring shook a little. Grating, do you still want to get married? As soon as his words fell, the door of the hotel was slammed open. Inexplicable emotions surged through my heart, and my right eyelid fluttered. Brother Ji, Sister Jianyan Shi. She jumped off a building. I nervously curled my fingers and just about reached out to lead Ji Huichuan over with me. The ring in his hand was heavily knocked down by his hand. When I came back to my senses, I found that he had already rushed out of the hotel door with an anxious look on his face. Even my parents, without looking back, left the scene. I was the only one left standing alone in the huge hotel. Once again, I was left behind by everyone. After I slowed down, I followed them closely. When I left the hotel, I saw my husband, tightly holding Su Jianian in his arms. The eyes that looked at me were filled with hatred. A wave of bitterness spread in my heart. I wanted to reach out to touch, but was pushed to the ground by my mother as she rushed over. The sharp stones on the ground pierced my hand, and blood quickly stained the hem of my wedding dress. A large group of people flocked to Su Jianyan's side. I pursed my lips. Clearly today was supposed to be my wedding. Why, even my last happiness Su Jianian had to take away. You murderer, you give back my daughter, you give back my daughter. It's you who forced my Jianyan to die, it's you who forced her to die. Ah. My own mother almost cried until she fainted, collapsing into my father's arms and cursing me. Even wanted me to die to accompany Su Jianyan. I woefully knelt on the ground, wanting them to listen to my explanation. Instead, I was kicked over there. I saw the corners of Su Jianyan's mouth go up a bit, and I rushed over to ask her not to play dead. But was slapped to the ground by Dad's mouth. Jianyan has been forced to die by you, what more do you want? I looked at the hem of my skirt in a bit of a trance. Ji Huichuan came to my side at some point. I looked at him as if I had grabbed a lifesaver, only to be heavily pushed to the ground once again. He held a mobile phone and disliked it in front of me. I was irritated and squinted my eyes before I could read the words on it. Don't blame Sister Fian, everything is my fault. Before I could open my mouth to say something, I was brought home by the housekeeper to be punished for kneeling. It wasn't until late at night that I waited for my mom and dad to return. Behind them was none other than my fiancé. Dad came over to me and I thought I had found out the truth. The next second he grabbed his hair hard. What the hell did you say to Jianyan to make her jump off the building so desperately? I tried to open my mouth to explain for myself, but my body suddenly throbbed with pain. Even breathing became very difficult. The medicine on the coffee table was inadvertently knocked over and I was suffocated, my face turning purple as I desperately crawled forward trying to pick it up. Not even close, a little closer when about to touch the medicine on the floor, Ji Huichuan squatted in front of me and picked up the medicine. My heart trembled as I looked hopefully at him in front of me. Medicine. Give me the medicine, Ji Huichuan looking at my supplication, his eyes were filled with disdain. Viciously pinching my chin. I'll ask you one last time Su Feiyan, why exactly did Jianyan die? The pain coming from my chin cleared my head for a few moments. I shook my head, the pain stopping my tears. Seeing that I didn't say anything, he let go of the hand clamping down on my jaw. Throwing the medicine into the bin with his hand, he strides out of the living room. I put my hopes on my parents who stepped aside. Instead, Dad moved away from meeting my gaze and turned up the stairs with Mom in tow. I leaned meticulously against the coffee table and let out a few deep breaths, forcing myself to calm down. Then, with a flourish, crawled towards the bin. Taking the medicine out and pouring it into my mouth, I passed out. Woke up again only to see them holding my diary and reciting it to my face. 18 years 5 clear place is so big it turns out that my mom and dad's so rich but my eyes are full of dislike. But why did my sister throw hot water at me Is not like me? 18 years 6 clear mom said to take me to the party, told me not to give her shame, and also bought me a beautiful little dress, but why did my sister want to break my dress? 28 years 8 cloudy sister does not like me, every time she wronged me, mom and dad do not believe me. Mom and dad don't believe me either, if my sister disappeared it would be good, I would be the only one in the house, and mom would care about me. Hearing these words, I anxiously rushed to Ji Huichuan and jumped over, wanting to snatch the diary out of his hands. Stop reading it! I fought for it but was pushed away by my brother. Sufine, you're really vicious, even faking the diary. Is it because you want to let mom and dad see it one day and feel sorry for you? Why are you so scheming? Losing Nian Nian even asked me to care more about you, you even wanted her to disappear and smeared her. You quickly tell me what exactly you said to Nian Nian to make her jump off the building so desperately. I couldn't get my breath from being pinched by my brother's hand. Enduring the pain, I pulled the corner of my mouth and said to these people in the living room with incomparable mockery, isn't she dead? How is it that just because of the words on her mobile phone you guys think that I forced her to die? Seeing my unawareness of my wrongdoing, my mother slammed the diary hard at me. Sandwiched in the middle of the diary was a suicide note in Su Jianyan's handwriting. Mom and dad, forgive me for what I did, I also can't bear to let you go, but I really have no way. My existence is a mistake, only if I die, my sister can live a life that belongs to her, and the family will really be peaceful and happy, and brother Huichuan, you have to take good care of your sister after I die, and be with her well. Forgive me. Looking at this suicide note, my hands unconsciously clutched the paper in my hands. Ji Huichuan ruthlessly pinched my neck and forced me to ask what I actually said to Su Jianyan. Looking at their anxious appearance, I snorted very much in my heart. If it was me who died, probably they would be happy. They couldn't ask, because I never said a single word to Su Jianyan to let her leave this house. For 10 whole years, the one who was bullied was clearly me. But they didn't believe me, and I had no words to defend myself. I gently closed my eyes, tears silently sliding down the corners of my eyes into the crevices of my hair. 10 years ago, I was brought here. Only then did I realize that the parents who scolded me were not even my own, and that the rich couple in front of me were. I was somewhat happy thinking that I would be greeted with a happy life that I had never experienced before. But ever since I recognized my parents and returned to the Su family, I was met with nothing but infinite ridicule. Everyone disliked me as the Su family's true daughter, but they all praised Su Jianyan for being a great lady. Jianyan is so good, she knows all the hard questions. Yes, 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 Jianyan is also the first in the piano competition. Su Jianyan is the pride of the Su family's parents. You're just a bumpkin. Many people said in front of me that I was inferior to Su Jianyan, and even my mom and dad would unnaturally show their dislike when facing me. And in order to catch up with Su Jianyan and make mom and dad proud, I started studying day and night. What I got was more mockery, calling me a toad and a learner. Obviously, I'm mom and dad's own daughter. But never had a single ounce of love. Thinking about this, the tears in the corner of my eyes grew. Dad saw me like this and pointed at me very angrily. Su Fei, don't think that I don't dare to do anything to you. Hearing these words, my heart ached as if it was being grasped. Even though I was already used to my mom and dad's cold words. But in seeing them not trusting me and saying these words to me, I still couldn't help but feel sad in my heart. Dad had a face of justice, as if I was a mortal sinner. Then he sent someone to remove all the design drawings, trophies, and gifts given to me by my grandfather from my bedroom. They tore up all my drawings in front of me, and had the trophies smashed. They took away all the equipment I could use to communicate with the outside world. And they threatened that I would be allowed only one meal a day, and that I would be confined to my room and not allowed to go out. Within days, however, I was unconscious in my room. Chronic malnutrition, coupled with a few days of not getting enough to eat. It made my body getting worse and worse. In a daze, I heard my brother and parents push open the door and look at me on the floor to discuss. Anyway, she has got the disease and won't live long. Why don't we send her to our family's product research lab to extract her memories and find the cause of Jianyan's death? With all my strength, I only moved my fingers. This tiny movement would not be noticed by anyone. Waking up again, I found my whole body secured in a sleep pod. Looking at the familiar equipment in front of me, I realized that this was my home research lab. My parents were discussing something with a researcher in a white coat. The researcher had a shocked look on his face and was frowning slightly. It seemed that he hadn't reacted from his dad's words. Sufian's state is not very good. Her body is very fragile from the disease. It is not recommended to forcefully extract her memories. The product is still in the testing stage. Besides, extracting memories is very painful and could lead to her death. My parents interrupted him and began to accuse me of my crimes in front of outsiders. Since she returned home, Jianyan has always been concerned about her, always afraid that she wouldn't eat or sleep well, but she forced Jianyan to die for herself. I'm doing all this now to get justice for my daughter. The researcher was a bit embarrassed and named other side effects. Even if the memory extraction is successful, side effects such as amnesia and dementia may occur. My brother pooh-poohed at me, pressing the researcher with his might to begin. This is my family's institute. Have you forgotten who pays your salary? Do you still want to work or not? Helpless, I saw the researcher walking towards me, handing me the contract in his hand. I gripped the black and white paper in my hand tightly, bitterness spreading to my heart. With a million thoughts, I signed my name and brushed the tears from the corners of my eyes with my hand. I asked my question to the researcher beside me. How will my memories be seen? Upon learning that my memories would be dropped into the display next to me in the form of a video, I signed the contract in my hand. Before lying down, each of their arrogant faces became my last memory. If they knew Su Jianyan's true face, would they still love her like they do now? After I lay down, the pain of my brain being forced open made me sweat. Consciousness was all a bit disorientated. Since it was my own memories, I could clearly see images from my childhood floating before my eyes one by one. It was the first day I had just arrived home. Su Jianyan smiled and held my hand, calling me sister, saying that she would take me upstairs to change into a pretty dress. Mom and Dad's words of praise for Su Jianyan clearly surfaced in my ears. My Jianyan is awesome, and even took her to change her clothes. Hubby, look, aren't our Jianyan especially good? What I didn't expect was that after lying down for a while, my mom's incredulous voice rang in my ears. How could it be? How could Jianyan do such a thing? I opened my disorientated eyes and looked at the incredulous Su's parents. I only felt that their behavior at this moment was very funny. Obviously, they were just now full of disdain for me as a bumpkin, but after seeing all of this, they don't believe that it was Su Jianyan who did this. That's right, after all, in their memories Su Jianyan has always been their pride. In their memories, Su Jianyan pushed me hard to the ground at an unseen corner. Condescendingly looked at me who fell to the ground humiliated. You remember, you are a country bumpkin. Mom and Dad won't like you, so what if you're biological? I'm the one that Mom and Dad raised from a young age, only me. Only deserve to be the Su family's real 1,000 gold, you can only be a bumpkin. Finished and viciously kicked me. I was pushed to the ground alive by her, and my hands were worn out. A voice from downstairs asked, what's wrong? Su Jianyan smiled smugly at me around the corner and fell down the stairs herself. I scrambled to my feet and looked down the stairs in horror. She was hugging her legs and crying so hard that the whole family gathered around. Seeing the memory of my yellow-faced self, cowering in the corner without a word, I felt very sour in my heart. That night, the whole family rushed to bandage Su Jianyan. She did not identify me, but shed tears very afraid of me. Sister, I will not steal Mom and Dad from you. Don't blame her, I fell down by myself. Mom and Dad, she said. Mom and Dad, as I make sister unhappy, not if I go, here was not my home, said the whole person, very aggrieved, flung in the arms of his mother and cried. Everyone was on Su Jianyan's side, accusing and resenting me. My mother was so cold to me that she thought I was jealous of Su Jianyan and pushed her downstairs. No matter how much I explained, the whole family just didn't believe me. After all, Su Jianyan really dared to lay a harsh hand on herself. In contrast, I stood in the corner cowering in fear and appeared to be lacking in courage. At this moment, my mother, who was standing in the research room, still didn't believe everything I remembered. She grabbed the researcher's collar and asked, "Is it possible that your equipment is faulty? How could my Jianyan do that? She's always been good." With my heart in my mouth, I heard her scream incredulously. It's also true that my mom would never believe me. Tears streamed down my face again at the thought. That was only in Mom's memories. In reality, Su Jianyan was never a good boy, but every time she did something wrong she would push me out to take the blame for her. On her own, she would stand on the sidelines and defend me. Even sometimes she would teach me in a serious manner. The torture she inflicted on me went far beyond that. The face of the researcher who was yanked by his mother's collar was not very good. The entire person looked at the woman in front of her with a slight anger, filled with rage at her questioning. There are side effects, but there is absolutely no problem extracting memories. Without waiting for the mother to say anything else, the next image on the display screen appeared. The expressions on everyone's faces froze. On the screen, I had already returned to the Su family for half a year. I thought I was happy, but I was living an even more cowardly life than I did at my adoptive parents'. Su Jianyan shoved a dead chickadee into my hand. Looking at me condescendingly, she told me to go and help her bury this in the back garden. It's also our Jianyan who has a kind heart, which is like this bumpkin cowering. If I say just now, it's also because she suddenly came back to make Jianyan scared, a bit of a sense of crisis to scare her. I turned my head sideways just in time to see my parents' disgusted expression. Only my brother looked at the chickadee in my hand and froze slightly. This chickadee looks familiar. I bitterly pulled up the corner of my mouth. Of course it looks familiar. This is my brother's own hand-raised chickadee. It's been by my brother's side since it was first born. Sneakily raised to such a large age. The screen went on to play, and I stood timidly across from Su Jianyan. Not daring to resist in the face of her orders, I turned around with the chicken but dropped a tear as I turned around with it. It seemed to be heartbroken for the dead chickadee. I carefully took that chickadee to the back garden, but ran into my brother. He looked at the cockatoo in my hand in a violent rage. His usually handsome face was smoothly made very scary by the anger. It was a pet he had secretly kept, and he thought I had strangled it. Rushing over, he pushed me down hard, riding on top of me and choking me to death. I couldn't catch my breath from the strangulation and tears came out of my eyes. I broke off and explained to my brother. Brother, it really isn't. Listen to my explanation. All I got was a heavier hand from my brother. Looking up but saw Su Jianyan standing there on the balcony, holding a snack in his hand. I'm not going to be able to do that, but I'm going to be able to do it. As if watching a theater performance, she looked at my side. The corners of his mouth were filled with a mocking smile. It was as if she was saying that I deserved all this. After that, my brother was getting more and more displeased with me. He would often do some pranks to scare me. Whenever I was trembling with fear, he would come over to me. This is your retribution. Hearing these words, I clasped my hands together in a death grip. Mom and Dad looked at the scene incredulously and shouted, "That's impossible. It must be you who deliberately messed up your mind. Is it that you want to interfere with memory extraction to wrongfully accuse Jianyan?" The researcher on the side looked at my parents with a speechless face. But the eyes that looked at me went full of heartache. The corner of my mouth pulled up a bitter smile. I was used to their reactions, but what I cared most about was my brother who had always been obedient to Su Jianyan. And at this moment, my brother had a look of shock on his face. How could Jianyan do this? See, no matter when, no matter how evil Su Jianyan did something, they would never believe it. And all I have to do is show up next to something, and they'll bite the bullet and say I did it. My heart was in great pain, and I thought I was numb to it all. But when I was confronted with these images, I couldn't stop feeling sad. Mom and Dad didn't believe everything I remembered and ordered the researcher to speed up the memory extraction. I lay there gradually becoming paler and paler, and even my hands fell unconsciously. Autonomous consciousness are a little festering. Time kept accelerating until 10 years later Su Jianyan's vicious face was completely exposed. She would add dirt inside the water I drank behind my back, would throw the dresses she didn't want at me, and then go to school to mock me as a substitute. Leading everyone to bully me and condescending to be the one who was cared for herself. I was made to drink water from the toilets and get down on my knees to shine their shoes. The desk hall will always be thrown in worms, toads. Even the person who expresses a little kindness to me will be made by her followers do not dare to take care of me again. Will also give me a little hint of my family's preferences when I am disliked by them appropriately. By the time I followed the hints and went to give a gift to carefully curry favor, I was met with even more disgusting feedback. I gave my brother a parrot. Su Jianyan said that my brother loves small animals the most. But when I brought the parrot to my brother, he threw it downstairs. Even the clothes I gave to my mom were thrown in the bin. Because what she offers are the most disgusting things in the family. Every time this happened she would look at the wretched me with great amusement. Then gracefully turned away. She happily tortured me for 10 years. My parents looked at my careful appearance in the display and were a little touched. Why, she never told me about these things. I really know nothing about this. If she had told me, I would not have been. Before the words were out of my mouth, I closed my eyes. At last it came, the night before my wedding. A long flash of shame, those memories have been hammering my heart. According to the marriage contract, Mother Su's own daughter and the Ji family's son would be engaged at the age of 23. But Ji Huichuan liked Su Jianyan and was unwilling to marry me, putting out harsh words that he would leave no stone unturned to get me killed if I married him. He never hid his distaste for me. And when he saw me, Ji Huichuan would always try to humiliate me. He always thought that I had set him up, robbed Su Jianyan of her marriage, and forced her to leave. It wasn't until he saw the picture and his pale face that he realized how stupid he had been. The week my parents went out on holiday, I came home early because of the end of the painter competition. Gleefully pushed open the door, ready to take a good rest. Before I could fully push open the door, I heard a sound that made people blush. I bumped into Su Jianyan and a foreigner having a rainy day at home. The two people were entangled together naked. Seeing me open the door, they shouted loudly in excitement. Especially Su Jianyan. She threatened me not to say anything or she would get someone to beat me to death. If I know that Huichuan knows, I'll find someone to kill you. I couldn't stop nodding in fear and returned to the room as if I couldn't see it. When I turned around, I also heard the foreigner jokingly call me together. After returning to the room, but also from time to time can still hear Su Jianyan waves of sound. Since then, the war between Su Jianyan and I seemed to have stopped. I spent some time peacefully at home. Probably because she was afraid that I would tell, she was not arrogant and domineering towards me. One night, Su Jianyan knocked on my room door. I pushed open the door and saw her standing there in a hurry. Very embarrassed, she invited me to go to the pub with her. I wanted to refuse, but I was afraid that she would say something to Mom and Dad. So I said yes. When we got there, the wine went down one by one. She actually cried and complained to me. Said how much she regretted bullying me for so many years. Said she was just confused for a moment, too afraid that Mom and Dad would forget her. Even said she wanted to die whenever she thought about it. To comfort her, I drank glass after glass of the wine she handed me. But I didn't see the flash of calculation in her eyes. After she got me drunk, she asked Ji Huichuan's assistant for the location. She sent me to Ji Huichuan's hotel. She also locked the door on her way out. My fiancé, Ji Huichuan, was incredulous. How can this be? How can this be? It was clearly Su Fian who set me up in the first place, and Jianyan said she only loved me. How could Jianyan do that? After the clouds and rain that day, Su Jianyan came to Ji Huichuan with her eyes red with tears. Standing across from him and questioning him, very painful to look at me. Even tried to lighten up in front of him. Just like she killed her brother's chickens to frame me. From then on, I became the sinner who destroyed the relationship between the two of them. At this point in the image recall, the instrument began to vibrate violently. It turned out that it was me, the memory extraction carrier, that couldn't take it anymore. My consciousness festered more and more, and I couldn't see the people around me. Breathing also became rapid. In my ears, I could only faintly hear who was shouting "Doctor." Someone else was tugging on my arm tightly, telling me to wake up. Could it be Mom and Dad? Or was it my brother and Ji Huichuan? I was startled by my own thoughts. They love Su Jianyan the most, how could they possibly call a doctor for me? Thinking about this, I started to give up on my sense of survival. It would be good to be dead. I was got off the apparatus by them. Sent into the hospital for emergency resuscitation. The instruments beside me niggled and irritated my eardrums. It was as if I was really dead, my soul floating overhead. I looked at myself lying on the cold operating bed. A bunch of doctors surrounded me, unsure of how to proceed. One of them, the little nurse who was always with me, looked at me and left tears in her eyes. My brother, my parents, and Ji Huichuan waited anxiously outside the operating room. My attending physician pushed open the door, wanting to speak. "Miss Su might." My mom inquired with an anxious look on her face, and for the first time, I saw concern for me on her face. It was as if she loved me so much. "What's wrong with my daughter, doctor? What's wrong with my daughter?" The tears were falling like rain, making me a little disbelieving. My brother held his head and hammered the wall, accusing himself of why he had treated his own sister so badly in the first place. The doctor shook his head and told the family to go over there and sign the critical notice. After signing it, my ever so high-minded dad. Surprisingly, he knelt down to the doctor. "Please, doctor, make sure you do your best to save my daughter, we owe her so much." The doctor didn't nod, but let his brother help his dad up. He himself turned around and went into the operating theater. I was suddenly in some kind of trance, unable to see what I had just seen. I don't know how long it took, but the doctor pushed open the door, saying that I was out of danger, and was currently still in a comatose state. The face was as pale as if it was paper thin. Very fragile, as if it would disappear in the next second. I was pushed into the intensive care unit. Although I was in a coma, I was perceptive of everything around me. Every now and then I could feel someone holding my hand, someone's tears falling on my palm. Mum sat beside me with a sad look on her face. Reaching out to touch my cheek, she was disturbed in her movements by a violent push on the door. She looked up at the door and her brother was looking out with an angry face. It was only after a while that she saw Su Jianyan walking with a grimace. When she saw her mom, Su Jianyan's face flashed with surprise. She also wanted to drag her mom like before and pamper her. But her mother dodged her. With a surprised face, she looked at Su Jianyan in front of her, as if she didn't believe she was still alive. "Where did you find her? Wasn't she sent to the morgue by us in person?" Mom looked up at her brother, only to see his brother's face full of anger rushing at Su Jianyan to make her kneel down. I went out to buy little Night a change of clothes and happened to bump into her shopping with someone else. "She's not dead at all." Her mother, who heard this, looked at her with an angry face. She bristled with concern. "I wasn't just shopping, and I did jump off the building that day I shopped to make up for myself." Her couldn't care less look made Mom and Dad furious. She did jump that day, but it was the first floor. In order for Mom and Dad to target me and kick me out of the house. She lied and said she jumped from the rooftop. Seeing that she was unrepentant, Dad screamed at her to get out of the ward. Seeing her parents, who used to love her the most, now treating her like this. She pushed aside her brother at once. She rushed towards me in the hospital bed. Reaching out her hand, she wanted to pull out my oxygen tube. "Bastard thing, if it wasn't for you, there's no way Mom and Dad would treat me like this." Seeing this, my brother rushed over and slapped Su Jianyan in the face. A heated argument broke out in the ward. In the middle of the argument, Ji Huichuan pushed open the ward. Seeing Ji Huichuan, Su Jianyan seemed to have a backer. With a smug face, she looked at the Su family's parents. If you guys apologize to me now, I can still consider letting Huichuan not withdraw the company's funds. Also, drive this dead man out of the Su family for me. She pointed at me in the hospital bed with a look of disgust. That arrogant look made the Su family's parents very chilled. She looked at her nails and waited for the Su family parents to apologize. Unexpectedly, Ji Huichuan, who was on the side, said something that embarrassed her. Miss Su Jianyan, I don't seem to have much to do with you. Moreover, the one lying on the hospital bed is my fiancé. Everything you said has nothing to do with Ji. Listening to Ji Huichuan's words, Su Jianyan's face turned a shade of white and green. It seems that she did not expect the man in front of her to say this. Huichuan, you're joking, right? You obviously love me so much, how could you? Right, I obviously love you so much, but you're counting on me. Ji Huichuan interrupted her words, looking condescendingly at the woman in front of her. Su Jianyan was about to open her mouth to say something, but all the gazes in the ward followed Su mother's voice to look at me. Xiao Lian's hand is moving. In the midst of all the gazes, I slowly opened my eyes. What I saw was the scene in front of me. Ji Huichuan was looking at Su Jianyan with cold eyes, while Mom, Dad, and my brother all surrounded me. The thing I once wanted the most is now right in front of me. But I don't want it anymore. Everything that comes late is cheaper than grass. My awakening ushered in my primary care physician. Mom and Dad were instructed not to expose me to any more stimuli. After the doctor left the ward, I looked at Su Jianyan in front of me and let out a question. Didn't you jump to your death? Still saying that I forced you to do it. As soon as the words came out, everyone's eyes fell on her. Looking at the way she couldn't say a word, I couldn't help but let out a cold snort. Slowly closed her eyes. And she was kicked out by Mom and Dad. But it wasn't sent to the police station, even though she had already constituted the offense of defamation. The beautiful name was because she was too young to do something wrong, and I could only be blamed by everyone because of her. Seeing my mom and dad do this, that part of me that was looking forward to it completely dissipated. Early the next morning, I just opened my eyes and saw Ji Huichuan, who came in after buying breakfast. He sat beside me, and that gaze blazed as if it was going to melt me. It was simply impossible to pretend it wasn't there. I took a deep breath and slowly turned my head to look at him. But he suddenly told me, I'm sorry Xiaolian, it was all my fault before. It's me who wrongly blamed you, and I realized that what I've always liked is you. I will definitely treat you well in the future. Looking at his hypocritical appearance, I didn't say anything. Instead, I recorded the video and sent it to Su Jianyan. After all, Su Jianyan really likes Ji Huichuan. As expected, in less than 10 minutes Su Jianyan rushed in. Following her was none other than my mom and dad, who said they were ashamed of me yesterday. I looked at this group of people and couldn't stop sneering. Xiaolian, after you get well, go back with Mom. Mom will make it up to you whatever you want. Mom will promise you. I looked at the woman in front of me and said word for word. Then I want to clear my account in the Su family and restore my original surname. Also, I want to withdraw from the marriage with Ji Huichuan. As soon as the words came out, I saw my mother looking at me with a shocked face. Her eyes instantly turned red, and the tears kept falling down. It was as if there was a water faucet that didn't cost anything. Xiao evening, are you still have hatred for Mom? It's Mom who is sorry for you. On the side of Ji Huichuan, he also tightly pulled my hand and begged me to forgive him. Xiao evening, I know wrong, I will treat you well in the future. Do not tell lies. Okay. Looking at Ji Huichuan's face, my stomach flipped. Using all my strength, I fiercely slapped him. For a moment, a slap mark appeared on his white face. An unprecedented silence filled the hospital room. I, on the other hand, leaned weakly against the pillow. The whole of me was breathing heavily as wave after wave of pain hit me. My mother, who was sitting next to me, noticed in an instant that something was wrong with me. Pressing call 0, she called my attending doctor. Looking at my condition, he looked serious. The patient's body won't allow her to have any more strong mood swings. One more and her body will really collapse. They looked at the doctor and nodded their heads sharply. After the doctor went out, they gathered around me again, attempting to continue persuading me, not taking what the doctor had just said seriously in the slightest. Looking at them, I couldn't stop sneering in my heart. Obviously, the doctor had already said not to let me have any more strong mood swings, and they still insisted that their egos continue to stimulate me. I wordlessly told them to get lost. Mum's face instantly went cold. She was about to say something but saw me breathing heavily again. Xiao, evening, you don't want to get excited. Mum will leave now. I was relieved to see them go. Everything I just did was an act. Whenever they pestered me in the days that followed, I pretended to be having an attack and shooed them away. Finally, under my efforts, they agreed to my request. My account was moved out of the Su family and also became the original name Xiao Fian. And Ji Huichuan also successfully withdrew from the marriage. After that, I finally had a few days of peace and quiet. The Su family parents also came to the hospital to visit me from time to time. But they all just stood at the door of the ward to look at me and let the nurse bring me the things they bought. Later heard the nurse's gossip, only to know Su Jianyan was driven out of the Su family. It was even called by Ji Huichuan to teach him a hard lesson. And every time I was asleep late at night, Ji Huichuan would come over to see me. But it was all too late. With my active cooperation, my condition improved. Finally, I managed to get out of the hospital after half a year. I informed the hospital not to tell anyone in the Su family. Don't tell Ji Huichuan either. By myself, I flew abroad. And it was only when the Su family's parents went to visit me that they realized I had already been discharged from the hospital. After some inquiries, they learned that I had gone abroad. I fought and struggled abroad and finally got my own company. My parents would send me messages from time to time, praying that I could go back to see them. But I never went back and never returned a single message from them. In order to prevent them from continuing to harass me, I changed all my contact information. It was 3 years before I returned to the country. My husband put his arm around my waist and took out his tablet to show me the recent news in the country. Some time after I left, Su Jianyan somehow infiltrated the company, trying to transfer property and sell company secrets to the right family. Caught by Dad, who came back to get the documents. That's what sent Su Jianyan to jail, and the incident made the national news. If it wasn't for their soft hearts, Su Jianyan would have gone in long ago. And Ji Huichuan also signed the wrong contract after that. Failed in a cooperation that should have resulted in fame and fortune. Lost everything he had, and the company declared bankruptcy. And that brother of mine was crippled in a car accident in order to save someone. I couldn't stop sneering in my heart as I watched what happened to them. It was all retribution. I ran into them after signing a contract with another company. I looked at my mom and dad, who loved to give me the cold shoulder in the past, looking at me cautiously at the moment. I pretended not to see them and left the place with big strides. I couldn't hear the voices behind me. After finishing the domestic matters, I once again embarked on a trip abroad. I also decided that I would never return to Cloud City again. For Su's parents, I only gave them a monthly alimony in accordance with the law.